Hello and welcome to Volume 8 of Nucleus Shortcuts. If you missed earlier episodes, don't worry. You can find them on our blog at nucleussec.com and on our YouTube channel. As usual, I'm your host, Adam Dudley, and our topic today is on the federal side of things. This is Nucleus for Continuous Monitoring and Accelerating ATOs, mainly for the federal space that Nucleus operates in. So my guest is Steve Carter. Steve is a Nucleus co-founder and our CEO. He's based in Jacksonville, Florida. And so in addition to enterprises and MSSPs, Nucleus has established itself in the federal space. And Steve was largely responsible for creating our foundation in the federal space. So I thought he'd be a great person to have here for this particular topic. Now, Steve has a background in government contracting for cybersecurity from his previous company. And this company was sort of the testing ground for Nucleus, where it was road tested, managing millions of vulnerabilities for the Department of Defense. So, Steve, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe share anything I might have missed?
Sure. Thanks for the intro. I think you did a fantastic job there. But I won't take all the credit for the federal traction, because there were a lot of people that were kind of key to helping us on our path to federal. But yeah, for my background, I'll add just a bit more color here, because it is kind of relevant to the topic. I spent the first 15 years or so of my career as a security engineer, supporting federal agencies. One of the things that I was really passionate about during that time was improving vulnerability management programs. And that was really just because on almost every project I worked on or ever supported, vulnerability management processes were, they significantly slowed down system and software development. And my background is also in software development. So I viewed vulnerability management and vulnerability management processes as kind of an inhibitor to innovation. So I spent a lot of my time helping federal agencies scale vulnerability management programs and make them faster and more efficient by helping them build tools that can automate mostly repetitive, manual, and time-consuming tasks that are often required for vulnerability management. So the last 5 years I've spent building Nucleus, first as the original developer of the software, and then obviously now I'm much more focused on strategy and partnerships and product direction and stuff. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Great. Thanks for summing that up. So I really zeroed in on there how in your background, I don't think I really knew this specific detail, but that you're able to observe this this almost adversarial relationship between software development and security, where security is often seen as something that's slowing down the software development process. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not sure that's unique to the federal government. I mean,
Right.
I think that's probably in a lot of large enterprises, maybe most of them.
Right.
And honestly, I think that by and large, the federal government has the same challenges as the private sector in regard to vulnerability management, right? Especially the private sector, large enterprises. They've got some of the largest and most complex networks, obviously, in the world. They've got every technology you can imagine under the sun. They have lots of different people and lots of different roles that all need access to vulnerability management or to vulnerability information for different reasons, so yeah, these are a lot of the same problems that the private sector faces with large enterprises.
Okay. So for the folks watching at home, would you mind just summarizing, what are those problems that might be specific to the federal government? And then on the other side of things, what are the outcomes they're trying to get instead of those issues?
Yeah. So kind of starting with the challenges, like I mentioned, mostly the same challenges, but they've got some extra challenges that really make vulnerability management more difficult to do and really much more important to do well. So as you know, and probably the audience knows, compliance is really a cornerstone in any federal cybersecurity agency and program. And there's really, at least my experience has been, there's this culture of compliance that you really don't see in the private sector. And when I talk about compliance, I'm referring to, of course, the NIST controls
Right.
primarily like NIST 853 is what federal agencies have to follow. That's one form of compliance, but I'm also talking about compliance with executive orders and compliance with some of the directives. Like we saw the CISA, Binding Operational Directive, come out a few weeks ago. So there's compliance with that. There's compliance with security hardening frameworks like DISA, DISA STIGs and CIS and stuff. So there's, just this culture of compliance. And so that presents some unique challenges. And I think that the impact of not being compliant in the federal government, because there is compliance in the private sector as well, but the impact of not being compliant in the federal space is that your system or your software can't go live. It can't operate on the network. A non-compliant system can't obtain an ATO or maintain that ATO over time. An ATO, if you don't know, means authority to operate. And it's in the kind of a unique formal process that the federal government has for saying, you're approved to operate on the network. And so to your original question, though, what outcomes are our federal customers trying to achieve with Nucleus? In addition to the normal outcomes for large enterprises, better visibility into all vulnerability information in one place. They want to analyze, prioritize, respond to vulnerabilities faster. They want to monitor and measure SLAs. And we do all this and more, but because I think of the importance of compliance in the federal space and the requirements that kind of fall out from all of this compliance, they have some unique outcomes that they rely on Nucleus for. So I'll give you a couple of examples. A lot of federal organizations have really specialized reporting requirements. So they have to maintain a document called a plan of action and milestones, otherwise known as a POAM. And it's basically a list of vulnerabilities and weaknesses, the plan to remediate them, the remediation status over time. And this is something that Nucleus it's able to track and report on really well. They also have really unique requirements for controlling access to vulnerability information so that, very specific vulnerability information is only shared with the specific people and groups that need it to, do their jobs. So we're able to compartmentalize vulnerability information really well in Nucleus to kind of satisfy that. There's a lot of processes for accepting risk and granting exceptions. And with Nucleus serving kind of it kind of serves as a single source of truth for all your vulnerabilities, but not just the vulnerability information itself, but also its status in terms of the risk acceptance, and when the risk was accepted and by who accepted the risk and when that acceptance expired.
Historical tracking and that historical record, which we maintain pretty much infinitely for our customers.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's a handful of things that are kind of unique, unique for the federal government.
But really what I heard there is that it's all revolving around obtaining and maintaining compliance for certain projects or certain reasons, including it sounds like the concept of an ATO. That concept in itself is a form of compliance, right? Because if they can't obtain and maintain their ATO, then they're not going to be able to operate their software. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And I should also say that federal agencies, it isn't only compliance, right? They still have to, they still have, sophisticated attackers that are knocking on the door all day, every day. So the most sophisticated nation states to worry about and contend with. But on top of that, it is very much a culture of compliance.
Awesome. So, we do have federal customers. We're working with various customers in the government, and so what are we seeing, or what are those customers seeing specifically in terms of the value they're getting out of Nucleus in terms of the things we've already discussed?
Yeah, I mean, if we just really focus on ATOs, that's where a lot of the value has been. And generally speaking, I think the ATO process for any federal agency is going to be really slow and cumbersome. And it isn't just because of bad vulnerability management or inefficient vulnerability management processes. But that said, vulnerability analysis and reporting is a very important part of the process to attain an ATO. And it takes a lot of manual time and effort, because that process today, if you don't have something like Nucleus, consists of manually downloading reports from lots of different tools, parsing out findings from these reports, figuring out who's responsible for what, emailing spreadsheets around, things like that. So there are some unique things that we do, again, that help to save a lot of time and ultimately do accelerate the ATO process, the process of obtaining an ATO to a degree, at least. So just by being a single database, for all vulnerability information, and aggregating and normalizing scan data from all the tools in use, and organizing it correctly, and being able to collaborate with all the different stakeholders who need to assess and review that information in one place, right? Just that saves you a ton of time that would have been spent doing things kind of the old manual ways. And so just that alone, will accelerate the process of obtaining an ATO. But then there's also okay, what about now that I've got an ATO, I'm compliant, now you have to maintain compliance. You have to, each year you have to maintain your ATO. And honestly, I think that's probably where Nucleus has been most impactful, is really helping in that. And that's what's called the continuous monitoring phase. And we've been really helpful in continuous monitoring of custom applications and products, to ensure that these ATOs are maintained all the time, because we can take all the scan results that are being generated from all the web app scanners that are in use, from the source composition analysis tools, container image scanning tools, and things like that. We can aggregate it, we can organize it so that product owners, developers, and security assessors can see the data that they need to see, for the apps and the products they're responsible for. And then we can automate that response when new vulnerabilities are discovered. So an example, I can give you, if you're a government agency, you've got, government agency, whatever, XYZ, you've got a custom app, you developed, it's in production, and it uses, let's say, the Struts Java library. And when that app was deployed, a week ago, there were no vulnerabilities. But this morning, a 0-day Struts vulnerability is announced, and most organizations today have scanning tools, or federal agencies, they've got scanning tools set up to run every day. They're doing a good job of that. And so they'll detect the vulnerability, but more than likely, no one will notice or do anything with that information, because it's not really actionable. And so, so with Nucleus, the product owner that's responsible for that app is going to be notified immediately. And that could be in Teams, it could be in Slack, it could be in email, whatever. A ticket's going to be created for the developer of the app to fix it. The SOC team's going to be notified, so they can create a web app firewall rule or an IDS rule. Your security assessor is going to be notified, so he can monitor the entire process and make sure that remediation occurs in a timely manner. So with Nucleus in place, there's just now this process to ensure that vulnerabilities are monitored and responded to in a consistent way, in a timely way.
Right. So just what I'm hearing is, just like our enterprise customers, where often they come to us and they're, as we say in this field, their people, processes, and technology around vulnerability management are kind of fragmented. They're just all over the place. And what we're allowed to help, what we're able to help with, is to bring all the people, processes, and tech into one place, and actually allow them to take productive action on all that.
Exactly.
And without it, everything is just very, very inefficient. So, as I've heard one of our colleagues describe it, Nucleus is like a glue that really glues together all the components of your VM program so that it can operate more efficiently.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Steve. Really appreciate you sharing all that. And before we wrap the episode, in your view, what is the most important thing for folks to take away from what we talked about here today? Say there's someone listening on the federal side and they haven't heard about Nucleus. What would you say to them? What should they take away from this?
Oh man, that's a really tough one. I would say it's not really so much about Nucleus, but just in general, I think one of the things I still see a lot in the federal space is this association of the term vulnerability management with vulnerability scanners.
Right.
And to me, the most important thing I hope people take away is that vulnerability scanning is not vulnerability management, right? Vulnerability scanning is detection of vulnerabilities, and it's the easy part. And there are lots and lots of tools that do that really well. And I love for people to start thinking about really just to start thinking more broadly about vulnerability management and thinking more in terms of those processes and technologies that are needed to respond to vulnerabilities, and how they can make those processes scale for large enterprises. And obviously, that's what we live and breathe at Nucleus, and something that we're happy to help with.
Great. Fantastic. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks so much for joining us today, Steve. We'll share any appropriate links in the show notes, including how you can get a free trial, take a demo, that kind of thing. And we'll see you soon on the next Nucleus Shortcuts.
All right. Thanks for having me, Adam.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.